le damos la bienvenida a su director ejecutivo, el señor Randy Durband.
Good morning. Buenos dias. It's time to use your headset if you're not understanding English for the translation to Spanish. It's very nice to be here. We're very excited from GSTC. I'll not repeat what our chairman, Mr. Luigi Cabrini, has said. My goal here is to present to you two things about GSTC. You see the title of the presentation is Mission and Current Activities. And that's two sets of ideas put together because many of you in the room know us very well. So for you, you get updates and current activities. And for those of you who don't know GSTC, I'm going to tell you now about the organization, who we are, what we do, what is our mission. GSTC, as our chair, Mr. Cabrini, said, was formed in 2010. We are created by these organizations that you see in the screen. Our founding members come from the United Nations system and from the Global Conservation System. UNWTO, United Nations World Tourism Organization, UN Environment, formerly known as UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program. Rainforest Alliance is here with us, one of our founding members in the conservation community. United Nations Foundation. These organizations founded us to be the leading global authority on managing standards for sustainable travel and tourism. At the top of the screen, you see two other logos. Also in the conference logo screen, there's the logo of the International Year of Sustainable Tourism Development. That's the web. And then 10YFP is the 10-year framework of programs for sustainable consumption and production of the United Nations system. We're directly involved in that endeavor. We're a member of the 10YFP. We're very active in that engagement. So the United Nations system and the global conservation community recognize us as the leaders in developing and managing global standards for sustainable tourism. To give you the history of how that came to be, the year 2005 was a very important year for the United Nations looking at this. The two leading agencies of the United Nations system that are looking at tourism and travel, the UNWTO and then UNEP, now UN Environment, came together in 2005 and did a number of things. They did the first global analysis we have of carbon emissions, and they determined at that time that 5% of global carbon emissions were coming from travel and tourism. That's the only time we've had a global study of carbon emissions. Just think of the difficulty of putting all of travel and tourism together. But they also did some work on defining sustainability and so forth, and we think that this definition that the United Nations put together in 2005 is the single best definition for sustainable tourism. It's tourism that takes full account of current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts. But it goes well beyond the environment to talk about the needs of the visitors, the industry, the environment, and so importantly is host communities. So that was 2005. Also, in the same year, they published the 12 aims of sustainable tourism, which they put into more language, these key ideas that you have here in the definition. And then only 2 years later, they started forming the GSTC. And so we came into existence originally to create guidelines, standards for industry, starting with hotels and tour operators. We do not work in aviation. That's left to the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. They work on sustainability in aviation. But we're the leaders in setting the guidelines and providing the tools for sustainability for hotels, accommodations. Tour operators, we use that term very broadly to include transport, to include travel agencies, anybody buying and anybody selling and producing travel packages is how we define tour operators. Then later in 2013, we developed standards for destination management and policymakers, and we'll talk a great deal about that in this conference. Important part of who we are is that as our founders looked at sustainability, they said, we do not want sustainability to be thought of as only environmental issues. The social issues relating to the impacts of tourism and the cultural issues are very important. So we consider central to our mission is that these 4 pillars are part of sustainability. They're included in that one sentence definition from 2005 from the United Nations, and they're an important part of our criteria, is that in addition to environment, we have the cultural, we have the social and economic, and the 4th pillar is management. Because if you're going to do something, to do it well and to do it right, you need to have management. So we have built into the standards techniques on the management for sustainability. Everything we do requires that everybody who engages with us consider these 4 pillars and to not ignore the social impacts and the community involvement of tourism. This is core to our beliefs. Other aspects of thinking about the definition of sustainable tourism. Sustainable tourism is not a noun. It is not a thing. We like to say within GSTC that sustainable tourism is a journey. We're all working towards it, and the conditions change constantly, so it's a never-ending path towards something. Recently, in the UNWTO statement regarding the International Year of Sustainable Tourism, their document made this comment that sustainable tourism should not be seen as a specific type of tourism, just as I said, but instead think about it as an aspiration for the impacts of all forms of tourism. So it's a journey to get where we want to be. So when we created the GSTC criteria as global baseline standards, they're truly global. We followed a process of inclusion of the development. There were some 6,000 inputs from around the world where we asked experts in travel and tourism, and this came from the public sector, private sector, NGOs, academia, consultants, everyone involved in travel and tourism in the world was invited to provide input, and that was condensed into 41 criteria, organized along the 4 pillars that you see on the screen, and we've got it in English and Spanish for you. All of our technical work is done in English because we're working globally, and every word counts on the technical side. So we do all our official work in the English language only, but we have our criteria available in many languages. And I encourage you to download the GSTC criteria from our website. We have them in Spanish, and which is a great learning tool and a great way to raise awareness is to distribute the GSTC criteria in Spanish and in your community and among your stakeholders. So if you look at the 4 pillars there, you see the first one is about management. But if you look at sections B, C, and D, what do you see? You see a pattern that our work in sustainable tourism is not just to fight against the negative impacts, but to promote the increased utilization, the maximizing the benefits of tourism. So we're trying to think positively and work towards more application of the positive benefits of tourism. So within each of these, there are separate standards. We have 41 of them. And then within each of them, we have performance indicators, and there's some 180 performance indicators. So there's a good deal amount of detail, but we took all those concepts and put them into 41. To give you a sense of what that looks like, in each section there's there's a number of criteria. So on the environmental side, for example, energy conservation, you can read it in both languages, just to give you a sense of what standards are like if you're not used to standards. From the management side, this is an extremely important one, the Destination Management Organization, and I'd like to comment upon that. We do not have a formal weighting of the importance of one criterion over another. However, for many of us, this is really truly one of the most important ones. This comes from the destination criteria for public policy and destination managers, not from the industry criteria. Though the industry criteria do have something similar about engaging, but this is an extremely important one We're going to repeat showing this slide during the conference. We'll have it on the screen again later this morning during our panel. But as part of my showing of examples of what criteria, I wanted to emphasize this one. As Mr. Cabrini said, as we designed this conference jointly with our friends at Cernatur, we designed content that we think has global relevance and has some direct relevance to Aysen and to Chile. And as we look at, as Mr. Cabrini said, we're hearing more and more voices globally about some of the dangers of too much tourism, especially in cities like Barcelona and Venice and Amsterdam and San Francisco, many cities of the world. But what your challenges here in Chile, where you are managing nature and you have challenges to conserve nature, protect nature, so that your children and your grandchildren and their grandchildren can benefit economically from tourism, to make it last forever, proper management is very essential. And key points here on criterion A2 of our destination criteria is that everywhere in the world, the public sector manages destinations. In our experience, and we brought together some global thought leaders on these topics, Jonathan Tortolo from National Geographic, Jim Sano from WWF, others, we're going to be talking about these issues throughout the conference. In our experience, looking everywhere in the world, we see that destinations are managed best when the public sector truly engages the private sector, when the public sector truly engages the community. And that's difficult, it can be frustrating, but going through those processes produces the best results. So at this conference, we want to emphasize this criterion, that management of destinations is inclusive, it's participatory, and that is, again, the same solution to solve the problems of the residents of Barcelona feeling like there are too many tourists, and the residents of Chile concerned about protecting their water, their mountains, and their great natural resources. So I ask you to think deeply about this one. Related to it is another criterion from section C, and that is proper visitor management, to put in the policies and the regulations in place that the visitor experience is managed properly. And then just, well, here's their public participation is one of the criteria that is specifically singled out. And on this slide, I also want to highlight that we have these performance indicators for each criterion, which I've already mentioned. So that's what criteria and standards and the performance indicators look like. What is the role of standards? Often people think of standards only for serving as the basis for certification. And that's certainly true. You need a set of standards to certify something. You have to go through a checklist. But standards can be used much more than that. A starting point of a journey to sustainability for a community, for a business, for a person, is to have awareness of the issues. So again, as I said, we encourage you to download our criteria in Spanish and use this as a tool for training, education, and awareness. Voluntary standards are often used as guidelines to regulation. Our dream is that today's voluntary standards become tomorrow's legal regulation, and that we keep pushing to greater rigor over time. They're an excellent tool for the use and measurement and evaluation of progress, and for market access clarity, which I'm going to talk about. So the GSTC criteria then are not a set of Yankee criteria or a set of Western or Northern Hemisphere or academia or whatever. Truly an inclusive process to create them. They have worldwide applicability. They're suitable for the developed and developing worlds, large and small businesses, urban, rural, everything. They very much consider the needs of indigenous cultures. And as I said, we've translated them into many languages. So I spoke about the role of standards, briefly on the role of certification. Not always so well understood. Certification plays a very important role. We think it's usually the end point of working towards sustainability. You cannot apply for certification of a business or a destination when you're only beginning to really look at sustainability. But the certification process provides a great verification and validity of fighting against false claims. And I want to make sure that we understand this word in translation of greenwashing, that we're using this phrase in English. It comes from, in the political sphere, when there's political propaganda, we have the word in English brainwashing. So this is a play on words. When people make a false claim to say that they're green, and they're not truly green, we refer to that as greenwashing. So that's what the word means. Certification is a tool for managing risk. It provides discipline for improvement. If you truly want your enterprise or your destination to be managed sustainably, you've got a large checklist of activities, of behaviors that you need to follow. And certification gives you that discipline to follow that. And again, a market access function, which I'm going to be talking about. Within GSTC, to give you a sense of who we are and what we do, this didn't come through well. But I'm going to describe to you the programs, activities that we do as an organization so you understand us better. So one of our key programs is that we serve as an accreditation body. And we have, we accredit certification bodies. So when a hotel, a tour operator, a destination gets certified, we don't certify anything directly. A separate certification scheme, whether it's SEO, SA, SEAL S here in Chile, or a private company that certifies a hotel, those are certification bodies, and we accredit them. So we add a layer of credibility to what they do. That's what we call the integrity program. And we have two elements of it. We have what we call GSTC recognized, which is we look at a set of standards and we indicate whether those standards adhere to the 4 pillars of GSTC. Do they include the 4 pillars of GSTC criteria and all 41 criteria? If a set of standards applies to us for us to verify that, then we grant this level we call GSTC recognized. GSTC recognized refers to words only on a standard. So when CLS, AOSA, has now recently just gotten approved, only yesterday by our accreditation panel for tour operators and previously for hotels, that means you're telling the world that we have Chilean standards based on Chile context, but they adhere to a global set of standards. Recognition does not refer to the process by which they certify. That's reserved for what we call accreditation, where we look at the process by which the certification body actually issues certificates. Is that process neutral? Is it truly a third-party independent verification? Do some applicants fail? That's true certification, is that it's a rigorous look at the process of certification. Those that gain that level, that certification body, and the enterprises certified by them have the right to use the GSTC logo in their operations. So these are two very different things. Recognition is about the standards, the words on a document, and accreditation relates to the process of how those standards are used. Are they done with competence, with neutrality? Then we have our market access work, which we take from that process of accreditation and try to help the world sort out the confusion that exists of so many labels. We know of more than 300 certification programs in the world for hotels being sustainable. This shows you only 50. So multiply this by 6, and you have the number of certification schemes in the world that we are aware of that are creating some sort of certificate, an award, something like certification. It's very confusing. In those 300, most are excellent, some are good, some are not. And so one of the reasons we exist is for the better ones to voluntarily apply to us, to come and get a mark, to sort it out. So how do we sort it out? Well, we were created to be modeled after other bodies, and other sectors that are doing this. Already established in the world for some key commodities that were developed before us. For wood and paper, the Forest Stewardship Council. For fish and seafood, the Marine Stewardship Council. Both were developed in the mid-1990s. These are well established. They put an eco-label on a package of fish. They put an eco-label on wood or paper that's produced sustainably. And we are created in their image to serve this role where we put the mark over the certification bodies to distinguish the good from the less good. All of us are following a global organization called the ISEAL Alliance that has 3 sets of codes for how to create standards, assurance, and impacts codes. And so like the Forest Stewardship Council for wood and paper, like the Marine Stewardship Council for fish and seafood, and like many others that are older and more established than us, we follow those principles for the development of our standards and for the operations of our activities. Rainforest Alliance is here with us. They're very active members in the ISEAL Alliance. They're full members and so forth. So that's kind of the basic structure of how that works. All of this process of these tiers, what I don't have on the slide are the actual certificate holders. Below it, at the lowest level, you would have hotels, tour operators, or destinations that could get certified. And then as the next tier is the certification bodies. These are those that are currently accredited by a GSTC. We have Ecotourism Australia here with us. Rod Hillman made one of the longer trips of the conference, is here from Australia representing Ecotourism Australia. Control Union has someone from their Argentina office. Rainforest Alliance is here with us. And EarthCheck, very active in Mexico and elsewhere. These have gained GSTC accreditation. Others are on the way. In our years of existence, we were building the framework, and we only launched and opened up the accreditation program only in the past year and a half. But it's very active now, and we've got others coming to us to get accredited. All of this is based on the idea of continuous improvement. When a hotel gets certified, it must be renewed 2 or 3 years later. Anything that when they first got certified, they said, oh, you need improvement, when they come back to renew it, they're going to look very carefully at that item. So the concept pushes everything upward and onward and getting stronger and stronger in your sustainability. We will change our standards. We will change our accreditation manual over time. We want all of it to move upward. Eco-labeling is on the rise. Here's the Forest Stewardship Council. They have a contract with the largest retail seller of wood in the United States, Home Depot, and they have relationships all over the world where the consumer can buy paper product or wood product that has their logo to show that that wood or paper has been sustainably produced. I took this photo in the lower left from a paper towel dispenser at a men's bathroom in Korea with the FSC logo. Rainforest Alliance again with us. Their market penetration of coffee, fair trade coffee, and fair trade chocolate, starting largely from Central America but global producers, has been 30 years in development of creating and distributing the idea of putting a fair trade logo on product. It's a very slow build to gain consumer awareness. But there are lots of other products. Accor hotels and other hotels like this one have their own internal in-house labeling of fair trade or organic or some type of good production that they indicate. And this is rising among all sorts of consumer products. We are not close to being ready for that. We have a number of challenges putting eco-labels on travel products. First of all, it takes money and time to build that kind of label. And we have the challenge of, I've shown you commodities. It's easier to label a thing, a piece of wood, or a package of fish, or a cup of coffee. We sell services mostly. How do you label an itinerary? It's more difficult. So it's more difficult to label services. But the good news is, in our youth, again, we're fairly new, just in the past 7-8 years we've been working on this, is that the GSTC framework is now being applied to make supply chains more sustainable at the wholesale level, at the supply chain development level. And I want to share with you the two most prominent versions of the cases of that, which we hope will serve as inspiration to industry throughout the world to do this. TUI Group is one of the largest travel companies in the world, based in Europe, but 150 global brands on all continents, enormous operation. They have more than 150 brands around the world. They use the GSTC framework. In the past few years, they've had required in their contract with all hotels that they become certified sustainable. And in the past, they would list 2 or 3 favored certification bodies. Now, in the past 2 or 3 years, they say in their annual report that they want those certifications to come from a certification body that is GSTC recognized. And they're very aware of our progress with accreditation. And their next step, I just met with them in London several weeks ago, when we get more of the certification bodies accredited and they have more hotels to choose from, they will change in the future to require that their entire supply chain of hotels are selected as certified by a GSTC accredited certification body. Of their owned and operated hotels, this is their annual report on sustainability from the year 2015. At that time, 66% of their owned and operated hotels are certified sustainable. And then 2 months ago, when their 2016 report came out, the number had increased from 68% to 77%. And in total, on their supply chain, almost 1,200 hotels around the world are certified sustainable, and they're moving in the direction for even bigger numbers. So they're a market mover. So as TUI moves in this direction, those hotels are now more sustainable for all their customers, right? Later this morning, you're going to hear from Jim Sano of WWF. He'll speak more about this project with Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, the second largest cruise line in the world. And last year, they announced these targets, where they've set carbon emissions targets, and they have set these targets for sustainable fish and seafood to be served on all their ships. They have many brands. They carry 5 million passengers per year. And they have these targets that 90% of fish and seafood served on their ships will be certified sustainable to the MSC label. And that for every time a guest gets off a ship and gets on land, on a shore excursion, on all of their brands, by 2019, all of those programs must be operated by a tour operator that is certified sustainable by a GSTC accredited certification body. So these are big steps for us to have TUI moving in this direction, for Royal Caribbean to do this. So we have the framework now in place for, at the wholesale level, for the travel providers to select certified sustainable product. So what we encourage national programs like yours, so it's wonderful that SAOSA is GSTC recognized as compliant. You're on a path where your national program can match what we're working with at industry in the private sector, and if they all come together following GSTC, there's less confusion in the marketplace and there's more involvement. So we all work together. This is this slide, this statistic to show that 25% of consumption demand controls 40 to 50% of the market. I get this from WWF. In all of their sectors where they're working on biodiversity and other issues, they have a strategy where they turn to industry giants. If they map out on biodiversity or water conservation or whatever the topic is, they look at the world and they identify the top producers that are impacting the pollution or the conservation issue. They have determined that if they can convince the big companies that are supplying 25% of the production that impact that conservation issue, and they convince them that have 25% of sales to green their supply chain, in their supply chain, those suppliers that are providing services for them, that are providing the product that they're selling. As I said with the hotels at TUI, if TUI pushes a hotel to become certified sustainable, not only TUI is using that hotel, other guests are using that hotel. So when you push that 25%, work on the top of the industry, then they have other clients, and that trickles down to impact 40 to 50% of consumption. So this is a very important strategy, is to get the giants of an industry to follow this, and then that impacts sustainable consumption and production. You work at the same time. So we're not famous, consumers don't know us, but we're working in the background to create a framework to make this happen in travel and tourism. Then we have a destination program, which is very relevant for our discussions here today. As Mr. Cabrini mentioned, Lago John Kiwe was involved in 2012 and 2013. We called them early adopters because they were working with us on the development of our destination criteria. So they were among the first 14 in the world to apply the destination criteria. Then we launched the destination criteria at the end of 2013, and now we are speaking with governments around the world and very large countries on all continents on policy. We're pleased to have our friends here from Botswana who are internationally recognized for their wonderful movement in sustainability. They'll be hosting the 10YFP conference at the end of November. We're working with the government of Indonesia in a very real way. And around the world, and so we're delighted to be working with you, Cernatur, on these issues. So we've developed tools. We can help with assessments of a destination to look how well is the management structure in place for sustainable management. We have training program, and you know, so we ask you first and foremost is adopt the criteria, disseminate the criteria, train your stakeholders on it. I won't go into further detail. You can learn on our website about how this all works. Kathleen Pesolano, Kathleen, can you stand? Kathleen Pesolano is our destination program director. She's in the dark somewhere. Anyway, she's here with us, and you'll meet her as one of the panelists, and she runs this program for us globally. And then we have a very active training program. We're active throughout the world. We have many Spanish language instructors, including here in the room, Jorge Moller, Natalia Naranjo. Why don't you stand up? You're in the light. Jorge and Natalia, please. These are GSTC authorized Spanish language trainers. Oh, and Beatriz, where are you? Beatriz Barrial, here, with Mexico. We've done a lot of training in Mexico and many other countries, and we offer the program around the world. We have it in Chinese language, Japanese, Thai, several others. And the program is relatively new. But we think, and we've proven this with the customers, the satisfaction surveys of people who have done this, the best way to learn the breadth of sustainability, the broad definition, is to be in the classroom with us for 2 or 3 days and go through the criteria one by one and really learn what really sustainability is all about. We offer online classes and we offer in-class sessions. We haven't done too much in Latin America this year. We did much for the last 2 years, but we need to do more. So we have the tools, we have the trainers, and we invite you to organize through your NGOs, through your government, through your trade associations, to call upon us to train your people on sustainability. So those are the programs of what we do. We have various working groups. We are, more than anything, a network of people. We're very poorly financed, very low resources, but we have an amazing global network of experts who are absolutely dedicated to promoting and developing sustainable tourism. And so we actually have our members, they pay us to join membership, and then we put them to work as volunteers to do a lot of the work in working groups. And we invite all of you to join in that cause. And here are the working groups we have: international standards, expert people on the technical side that help guide us on our accreditation schemes, education and training, communications and membership, market access, destination stewardship. We have many of our destination stewardship people here with us that you'll be hearing from in this conference. And then a new one we just formed, business travel. So we invite you to join us, get engaged in these ways. Mr. Cabrini has mentioned the country representatives that are present here with us. We have more. These are with us here today. I've mentioned Beatriz, Natalia, Jorge Moller here in Chile, and then also Yanis Pappas. Can you stand up? He's one of our board members. So you're right, second row. Stay standing. Yanis Pappas from Greece. Stay standing. And I do want to acknowledge the board members of GSTC that are with us today. Yanis is honor member of our board. Kathy Parsons came from Australia. She's the chair of our accreditation panel. Mr. David Randall, stay standing. David Randall from the University of South Florida, Patel College of Global Sustainability. Jorge Moller from Chile, on our board of directors. Stand, Senor. Beatriz Barrial, once again from Mexico. Luigi Cabrini, the chairman of our board, please stand again, sir. And so we had a board meeting yesterday. Thank you very much for standing. Thank you for being here. I encourage you, the reason I asked them to stand is I want you to find them, and I want you to find our trainers and our board members and learn more about us. We had a board meeting yesterday globally. And Blake Rogers from Canada, where are you? Blake, you stand up. I've missed you. Somewhere. Okay, Blake Rogers from Canada. I know many of you know him from our event in Quito a couple of years ago. So just very quickly on what we're trying to do from the conference, themes have already been discussed, but from our perspective, here are some of the key points, is that we're sharing effective strategies for all sorts of stakeholders, of businesses and policymakers, with a special emphasis on destinations in Aysen and throughout the world. I think there's going to be content that's absolutely relevant to Aysen, to Chile, and to the world, and talk about the value and roles of standards and certification. This is technical information that you don't work with regularly, but it's very important. If you care about sustainability, it's important for you to have some understanding of the value and the role of standards and certification, so you'll get learning on that. Other key themes include climate change adaptation, marketing, indigenous tourism, and more. I'd like to thank our co-organizers of this event. That's already been discussed, but also some additional sponsors. Yannis, stand up one more time. Yannis Pappas from Greece. His company, Green Evolution, is paying for the carbon offsets of this entire conference. So if you've not already done so, complete our survey we asked to give us the data to make the calculation of the carbon emissions from this conference, and Yannis is paying for the offsets for that. And we thank these other sponsors from Universidad San Sebastiano, Chile, and the European Union for their support in this. And our media partners who are here, one in person, Travel, T plus SG is Travel plus Social Good. Kelly Louise, can you stand, please? No? Okay. And all of these other organizations, some are here in person and some are not, we thank them. We're live streaming on Facebook, so text your friends all around the world that we're live streaming on Facebook for the plenary sessions in Track A, which are in both languages. And we thank UNWTO, and we thank all of you for participating. Here we are in Korea last year. We're so happy to be in Chile this year. Thank you very much. We look forward to learning, sharing, and becoming more sustainable together. Thank you very much.